In the echoing halls of Boston Police Academy, Sarah Coleman walks alone. Her scarred arms, rarely exposed, tell a story of pain and resilience that no one cares to read. Each whisper, each glance follows her like shadows. The administrative assistant with shoulder-length blonde hair and downcast eyes carries herself with a quiet dignity that masks something profound. During a department shooting competition, mockery rains down from instructors and cadets alike. The secretary thinks she can shoot. They laugh, pointing at her damaged hands. But when Sarah takes her stance at the firing line, something changes. Her eyes sharpen. Her breathing steadies. The scars on her arms seem to pulse with memory as she raises the weapon with unexpected precision. In the observer's box, a retired Marine captain freezes, his gaze locked on the faded tattoo visible on her inner wrist. The room falls silent as 15 perfect shots find their marks, and the captain stands at attention. Addressing her by a rank no one knew she carried. What if the scars you hide are the very proof of the hero you once were? Sarah Coleman arrived at work every morning at precisely 6:45, a full hour and 15 minutes before her shift officially began at the Boston Police Academy's administrative office. She preferred these quiet moments when the building stood nearly empty. At 35, Sarah was neither remarkable nor forgettable, medium height with shoulder-length blonde hair that she kept neat but simple, blue eyes that rarely made direct contact, and a wardrobe of modest, professional attire that never drew attention. What did draw attention, however, were the burn scars that covered her neck and extended down both arms to her hands, creating a landscape of damaged tissue that she concealed beneath high collars and long sleeves whenever possible. The small wooden desk in her office contained few personal effects. A simple frame turned slightly away from visitors' view, containing a photograph of 5 people in military uniform standing before a helicopter, their faces sun-weathered and serious. Beside it, locked in her top drawer, was a small wooden box containing a Purple Heart and a Navy Cross that no one at the academy had ever seen. As she organized the day's files, Sarah moved with an efficiency born of military precision, though none of her colleagues recognized it as such. To them, she was simply the quiet, competent woman who managed the administrative side of things, whose scarred appearance occasionally made people uncomfortable, and whose personal life remained a complete mystery despite her 3 years of employment. As the morning progressed, Chief Instructor Marshall's voice boomed down the hallway as he berated a group of cadets. At 45, Marshall was the Academy's most decorated instructor, a former SWAT team leader whose transition to teaching had done nothing to soften his abrasive personality. The registration deadline for the upcoming departmental shooting competition was approaching, and as Sarah updated the participant database, a sudden impulse overcame her practiced caution. Without allowing herself time to reconsider, she filled out a form with her own name, checking the box for the civilian staff category. Behind her administrative facade, Sarah Coleman had once been Staff Sergeant Sarah Coleman, United States Marine Corps, Force Recon, one of the first women to qualify for the elite Special Operations Unit. Her marksmanship scores remained legendary among a certain circle, though those records were now sealed in classified files that gathered dust in Pentagon archives. The small tattoo on her inner wrist, partially obscured by scarring, was the emblem of her unit. The silent professionals whose missions never made headlines but shaped geopolitical realities in ways the public would never know. The photograph on her desk captured the only team she had ever truly belonged to. 4 men and herself, bonded by experiences that defied explanation to outsiders. The transition from warrior to civilian had not been of her choosing. The explosion that had scarred her body had ended her military career in a blinding flash of fire and shrapnel on a dusty road outside Kandahar. 3 teammates survived because of her actions that day. But the woman who had pulled them to safety was fundamentally altered, not just by the physical scars that marked 60% of her body, but by the invisible wounds that the military doctors had clinically labeled as severe post-traumatic stress disorder with complex trauma features. 18 months of surgeries, skin grafts, physical therapy, and psychological evaluations had followed. The hospital walls had begun to close in around her, and the pressure to become a symbol, the decorated female Marine who had defied expectations, threatened to suffocate what remained of her identity. So she had made a choice. After receiving her honorable discharge and medals in a private ceremony that she barely remembered, Sarah Coleman effectively disappeared. She used her military benefits to fund a modest but comfortable existence, deliberately seeking employment where her skills would be adjacent to her former life, but her identity would remain obscured. The Boston Police Academy had seemed perfect, close enough to feel familiar, distant enough to remain safe. That evening, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, examining the unit tattoo that had once been a source of immense pride. The scar tissue had distorted portions of the design, but the essence remained, a dagger crossed with a bolt of lightning, surrounded by a wreath of laurel. The words "silent professionals" partially visible beneath. She traced the outline with her fingertip, remembering the day her team had all gotten the same mark. Major Richards had been the first, insisting that, as their commander, he should endure the needle before asking his team to do the same. "We carry this not as decoration," he had told them, "but as a commitment to the mission, to each other, no matter what." On Monday morning, the first day of competition week, Sarah arrived to find the academy transformed. Banners hung in the main hallway, announcing the event, and an atmosphere of excitement permeated the normally serious environment. There, in the civilian category, was Sarah Coleman, administrative staff, listed as the only entrant in that division. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she hadn't anticipated. But there was no backing out now without drawing even more attention. Chief Instructor Marshall stopped by her desk, his imposing frame filling the doorway. "So, Coleman, I see you've signed up for the competition. Didn't know you had any interest in firearms." His tone carried a hint of amusement that made her skin crawl. Sarah maintained her composure. "Just thought I'd participate in the department event. Support morale." Marshall's laugh held no warmth. "Well, it's certainly ambitious. You know how to handle a weapon? Basic safety, at least?" She kept her expression neutral, despite the condescension dripping from his words. "I've completed the civilian firearms safety course." Marshall nodded, clearly unconvinced. "Well, don't worry. We'll have plenty of instructors on hand to make sure you don't hurt yourself. Might want to be careful with those hands, though." His gaze lingered pointedly on her scarred fingers. "Always good to have some diversity in the competition. Makes for better publicity." The whispers continued throughout the day, growing in volume as word spread of the secretary, with the melted hands who thought she could compete with trained officers. The female cadets were particularly cruel. During lunch in the academy cafeteria, Sarah sat alone as usual, pretending not to hear the conversation at the nearby table where Cadet Jessica Wilson held court. Maybe they should create a special handicapped category, Wilson said, loud enough to ensure Sarah would hear. "I mean, it's nice they're being inclusive and all. But come on, look at those hands. She can barely type without wincing. How's she going to handle recoil?" The laughter that followed burned more than any of the surgeries Sarah had endured. By Wednesday, what had begun as whispers had evolved into open mockery. Someone had posted a modified version of the competition flyer in the break room, featuring clip art of a cartoon figure with exaggerated burn scars dropping a gun. When she entered the women's locker room to change for the preliminary safety briefing, Cadet Wilson and her friends made a show of moving their belongings away from where Sarah placed her bag. "Don't worry. Wilson said loudly. I brought extra hand sanitizer for everyone. The implication was obvious and cruel. The preliminary briefing was held in the Academy's main lecture hall. Before we begin the standard safety protocols, Marshall announced to the assembled group, I'd like to acknowledge our unique participant this year. Sarah Coleman from administrative staff has bravely decided to join us. He gestured toward her, forcing every head in the room to turn in her direction. I think we should all appreciate the courage it takes to step so far outside one's comfort zone. Let's make sure to provide any extra assistance she might need during the competition. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable, cloaked in a thin veneer of professional courtesy. We're honored to have several distinguished observers joining us for the finals, Marshall continued. Representatives from the mayor's office, the police commissioner, and a special guest judge, retired Marine Corps Captain James Winters, who will be evaluating tactical effectiveness in our advanced scenarios. Sarah felt her blood run cold at the name. Captain Winters had served as a liaison to her unit on 2 operations. While she doubted he would remember a single Force Recon staff sergeant among the hundreds of Marines he had worked with, the connection to her past life felt dangerous. The preliminary qualification round should have been straightforward, a basic marksmanship test at standard distances. As the only civilian entrant, Sarah had expected to shoot alone, but instead found herself assigned to the first group of the day, alongside the Academy's top cadets, including Wilson. The qualification course was simple: 20 rounds at 3 distances, scored on accuracy, basic law enforcement standard, and far below the level of difficulty Sarah had trained for in the Marines. Shooters, prepare your stations. Sarah organized her ammunition methodically, checking and rechecking her weapon with practiced efficiency. Shooters ready. Sarah raised her weapon, ignoring the pain that flared across her damaged hands. Fire when ready. The first 5 shots were easy. Despite the discomfort, Sarah placed them in a tight grouping. Center mass on the target. Not perfect, she deliberately avoided the precision she was capable of, but solid, respectable shooting. At the final distance of 25 yards, she had settled into a rhythm, her body remembering what her conscious mind had tried to forget. As scores were posted, her name appeared in 3rd position among the first group, behind Wilson and another top cadet, but well above several others who had been shooting competitively for years. The whispers started immediately. Beginner's luck, someone muttered. Marshall probably felt sorry for her and bumped her score, suggested another. Wilson was less subtle. Must be a scoring error. No way Scarface outshot Diaz and Peterson. The nickname landed like a physical blow, but Sarah kept her expression neutral as she gathered her equipment. That night, Sarah barely slept. Her dreams were infiltrated by memories: the dusty road outside Kandahar, the explosion that had changed everything, the screams of her teammates as she dragged them to safety despite her own burning flesh. She woke, drenched in sweat, the phantom smell of burning fuel and flesh so vivid she had to check her arms to confirm she wasn't still on fire. On her nightstand lay her service medals, removed from their hiding place for the first time in years. The Navy Cross gleamed dully in the faint light from the window, awarded for the very actions that haunted her dreams. Sarah picked up the medal, its weight familiar in her palm. Major Richards had visited her in the hospital before her last surgery, bringing news of the commendation. This isn't just medal and ribbon, Coleman, he had said, his normally stern face softened with something like pride. This is recognition that when everything went to hell, you chose others over yourself. Not everyone does. Remember that when the recovery gets tough. She had nodded, unable to tell him that the medal felt like a cruel joke, recognition for actions that had left her fundamentally altered, unable to continue the only life she had ever wanted. Friday morning arrived with a tension that permeated the entire academy. Scenario Day was the point where pure marksmanship gave way to tactical thinking and decision-making under pressure. The scenario building featured movable walls, multiple rooms, and sophisticated targeting systems that presented both hostile and civilian targets. As Group B gathered for their briefing, Marshall approached as the range officers were distributing simulation weapons. "Coleman," he said, his voice carrying to ensure others would hear, "given your limited experience, perhaps you'd prefer to withdraw before this phase. No one would think less of you." The implication was clear. Everyone already thought less of her. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I qualified for this round. See ya. I'd like to complete the competition." Marshall explained the scenario: an active shooter situation with multiple hostages, requiring participants to clear rooms, distinguish between threats and civilians, and neutralize hostile targets while minimizing collateral damage. When Marshall finished, he turned to Sarah. "Coleman, anything you need clarified before we begin? The difference between cover and concealment, perhaps? Or how to maintain proper grip despite your condition?" The question was designed to humiliate her before her peers. "No questions. See ya." Instructions were very clear. Sarah was scheduled last in her group. Wilson completed the course with confidence bordering on cockiness, posting the fastest time in the group, though with several procedural errors. When her turn came, Sarah approached the starting position with a calm that belied the storm within. Everyone was expecting her to fail, not just to perform poorly, but to break down entirely. Sarah moved through the doorway in a smooth, tactical entry that would have made her Force Recon instructors proud. The muscle memory was overwhelming. Not just the physical movements, but the hyper-focused mental state. The tactical awareness that had once been as natural as breathing. The first room contained 2 targets, one hostile with a weapon visible, one civilian with hands raised. Sarah engaged the threat with 2 precise shots to center mass, leaving the civilian untouched as she continued her methodical progress through the space. Room after room, she maintained perfect form, perfect discrimination between targets, perfect shot placement. The final room presented the most complex challenge: multiple threats with partial concealment. Hostages in close proximity, she processed the scene in fractions of seconds, engaging each threat in order of priority. Her movements fluid, despite the nerve damage in her hands. When she emerged from the final room, the timer showed she had completed the course nearly 30 seconds faster than Wilson. With perfect target discrimination and shot placement, the range officer stared at her in barely concealed shock. "Course complete. Please proceed to debrief." The debriefing room was uncomfortably quiet as Sarah entered. The scoring officer cleared his throat. "Coleman, your final score for the scenario is 98 out of 100. That's the highest in your group." Marshall stepped forward, suspicion now evident in his stance. "Where exactly did you say you received your firearms training?" "Coleman?" Sarah maintained her composure. "I didn't say, sire, but I completed the standard civilian course at Boston Firearms Academy last year." Marshall's eyes narrowed. No civilian course teaches that level of tactical movement or target discrimination. You've had professional training. Military? It wasn't really a question. That evening, alone in her apartment, Sarah faced the decision that had been building since she first entered her name in the competition. Tomorrow's final round would be impossible to navigate without further exposure. Captain Winters would be observing, increasing the risk of recognition. She sat at her small kitchen table, withdrawal form in front of her. Ben Inhalt. One signature and she could protect what remained of her carefully constructed life. Yet something stopped her. The pen hovering above the signature line. On her wrist, the unit tattoo seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Silent professionals. The motto had once meant everything to her. The commitment to excellence without recognition, to service without acclaim. With sudden clarity, Sarah tore the withdrawal form in half. She was tired of hiding, tired of pretending to be less than she was, tired of dishonoring the training and service that had shaped her. Saturday morning arrived, bright and clear. The academy was abuzz with activity. The final day of competition, drawing not just participants, but dignitaries and media. Sarah arrived early as always, moving through the quiet halls with purpose. In the locker room, she changed into the required uniform, BDU pants, and a simple black t-shirt that left her scarred arms fully visible for the first time. The advanced course was set up on the academy's outdoor range. A complex array of obstacles, cover positions, moving targets, and environmental challenges. As competitors gathered for briefing, Sarah noted the VIP observation area where Captain Winters stood alongside the police commissioner and other dignitaries. Marshall announced, "For our distinguished guests, I'd like to point out a surprising addition to our final roster. Sarah Coleman, from our administrative staff, has somehow qualified for the advanced course." The emphasis on somehow was unmistakable. Sarah felt the heat of multiple gazes, including Captain Winters, who was studying her with sudden interest. Wilson's performance was impressive by any standard: clean movements, good accuracy, strong tactical decisions. The crowd of academy personnel cheered as she finished with what seemed an unbeatable time and score. When Sarah's turn finally came, an expectant hush fell over the crowd. Marshall's introduction was perfunctory at best. Final competitor, Sarah Coleman. Administrative staff. The dismissive tone suggested everyone should prepare for either comedy or disaster. As Sarah took her position at the starting line, she allowed herself one glance toward the VIP area. Captain Winters was leaning forward now, a slight furrow in his brow as if trying to place her. The buzzer sounded, and she was moving. What followed wasn't just a demonstration of marksmanship, but a masterclass in tactical movement. Sarah flowed through the course like water, each motion precise and economical, each shot placed exactly where intended. Over obstacles, through confined spaces, engaging multiple targets while on the move, she performed with a fluidity that couldn't be taught in basic courses. It was the muscle memory of someone who had done this under real-world conditions, where failure meant death. The crowd fell silent as her performance continued. The only sounds the report of her weapon and her controlled breathing. When she reached the final station, a series of hostage targets requiring perfect shot placement, she executed with surgical precision, placing each round exactly where it needed to go despite the nerve damage in her hands. As she crossed the finish line, the timer showed she had beaten Wilson's unbeatable time by nearly 45 seconds. With perfect accuracy scores across all stations, the silence that followed was profound, broken only when the range officer announced, "Course complete. Perfect score." Sarah returned her weapon to the clearing barrel. Following protocol with automatic precision, she turned to face the crowd. Finding a sea of stunned faces, Marshall looked like he had swallowed something unpleasant, while Wilson stood open-mouthed in disbelief. It was then that Captain Winters stepped forward from the VIP area, moving with purpose towards Sarah. As he approached, his eyes fixed on her wrist, on the scarred tattoo now clearly visible, recognition dawned on his face. Followed by profound respect, he stopped directly in front of her and did something that sent shockwaves through the crowd. He came to attention and rendered a perfect military salute. "Staff Sergeant Coleman," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent range. "Force Recon, Special Operations Team Delta, Kandahar Province, 2018. Sarah hesitated only a moment before returning the salute with parade ground precision. Captain Winters. It's been a long time. See ya. Winters held the salute a beat longer than necessary, a gesture of profound respect that no one could misinterpret. I was the liaison officer who reviewed the after-action reports from Operation Shadow Step. He continued. 3 men alive today because you dragged them from a burning vehicle while under enemy fire. Despite your own injuries, Navy Cross recipient. One of the highest decorated female Marines in Special Operations history. The words hung in the air, transforming the space, and everyone in it. Sarah felt the walls she had built around her past crumbling, felt the weight of hidden identity lifting from her shoulders. Marshall stood frozen, the implications of his previous behavior toward her visibly sinking in. Wilson had gone pale, her earlier mockery now revealed as profoundly misplaced. Winters turned to address the assembled crowd. Some of you may not understand the significance of what you just witnessed. Staff Sergeant Coleman was not just any Marine. She was Force Recon, the elite of the elite. The tattoo on her wrist identifies her as a member of one of our most classified special operations units. The skills you just saw demonstrated were not acquired at some civilian firearms course. They were forged in combat, under conditions most of us can't imagine. Winters continued. The scars you've all seen, perhaps mockingly until now, were earned, saving her team after an IED explosion. She received the nation's second highest military decoration for valor, though you'd never know it because true operators don't advertise their accomplishments. They simply serve. He turned back to Sarah, lowering his voice. I apologize for the exposure, Staff Sergeant, but some truths deserve to be known. The award ceremony that followed seemed to take place in an alternate reality. Sarah received not just the top marksmanship trophy, but a standing ovation from many of the same people who had whispered behind her back days earlier. She accepted both with the same quiet dignity she had shown when facing their scorn. Marshall attempted an apology that sounded more like self-justification. Sarah acknowledged it with a simple nod. What meant more was the approach of a young female cadet, not Wilson, but a quiet first-year student who had never participated in the mockery. Ma'am, the cadet said, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. I just wanted to say thank you. For your service? Yes. But also for showing us what's possible. I've been struggling here, thinking maybe I didn't belong. But seeing you today. She trailed off, unable to fully articulate the impact. Sarah smiled. Really smiled. For what felt like the first time in years. The hardest battles aren't always the ones with bullets. Cadet, remember that. She removed her shooting gloves, custom-made to accommodate her scarred hands, and offered them to the young woman. These might help with the range qualifications. They're yours if you want them. As Sarah walked from the academy grounds that afternoon, she felt dozens of eyes following her, not with judgment or pity, but with something new, respect. Captain Winters caught up to her in the parking lot. The police commissioner would like to speak with you about a potential training position, he said. If you're interested. Sarah considered the offer, weighing it against the comfortable invisibility she was leaving behind. I'll think about it. See ya. Winters nodded, understanding the complexity behind her simple response. Whatever you decide. Coleman. It's good to have you back in the world. He rendered one final salute before walking away, leaving Sarah standing beside her car, the autumn sun warm on her scarred skin. For the first time since the explosion, she didn't feel the immediate need to cover up, to hide the marks of her journey. They were, after all, proof of choices made. Lives saved. Battles survived. As she drove away from the academy, Sarah glanced in her rearview mirror at the young female cadet, now wearing her shooting gloves. Watching her departure, the greatest warriors aren't defined by their victories in battle, but by the silent dignity with which they carry their scars. In a world quick to judge surfaces, how many heroes walk among us? Their greatest battles hidden beneath their skin?